While Ron Weasley was at the center of the films, he might be one of the most underrepresented characters compared to how he was in the books. They miss many details about his character, and in this video, I'm going to fill in those details as I explain his life the way it was supposed to be done. Now this video is based on the books, not the movies. There is a big difference and many differences when it comes to the story, as the films changed a lot. Now let's get started. Ron was born to Arthur and Molly Weasley on March 1st, 1980, and was one of 7, having 5 older brothers and 1 younger sister. In the books, he was tall and lanky, had a lot of freckles on his face, and like all the other Weasleys, had red hair. Ron grew up in the Burrow, and his room was on the 5th and top floor. Every inch of his wall was covered in orange posters for his favorite Quidditch team, the Chudley Cannons. He also had a ghoul live above him in the attic, who often came down to Ron's room, which bothered him a lot. Ron always felt as though he was in the shadow of his siblings. Bill, the prefect and head boy, Charlie the Quidditch star, Percy the smart one, Fred and George the funny ones, and when she got older, Ginny the attractive one. This led to Ron being very insecure, especially when he tried to match his older brothers at all the things they were good at and ended up coming up short. The Weasleys were very poor, and because of this, pretty much all of Ron's possessions were secondhand, something that he was very embarrassed to admit.
Red hair and a hand-me-down robe? You must be a Weasley.
As kids, Ron and his siblings pulled pranks on each other, which one time led to a hole forming in Ron's tongue after the twins told him to eat an acid pop. Ron and his siblings also loved to play Quidditch in their backyard, and most of the time, Ron fell behind his brothers in terms of skill. Though one time, Ron flew so high that he almost hit a hang glider. When Ron turned 11, he got ready to start his first year at Hogwarts, and not only did he get hand-me-down robes and books, but he also got a hand-me-down pet, a rat named Scabbers that formerly belonged to Percy. Before going through the platform to 9 3/4, he met Harry.
It's Ron's first time to Hogwarts as well.
Before boarding the train, Fred and George told Ron, Ginny, and Mrs. Weasley that the boy they helped get through the barrier to King's Cross was the famous Harry Potter, though Ron did not believe them, thinking it was another one of their jokes. Ron got on board with Fred and George, and he realized that they were telling the truth about Harry. When he took a seat in Harry's compartment, he looked at him closely, but then quickly looked away as not to stare. After Fred and George introduced themselves, they went to sit with their friends, leaving Ron and Harry alone. Ron asked Harry about his scar, while Harry asked Ron about being raised in the wizarding world, both equally fascinated with the other. When the Trolley Witch came around selling food, Ron embarrassingly said that his mom had packed him homemade sandwiches, not being able to afford food like that. When he looked at it, he was even more bummed that it was corned beef, another reminder that in his eyes, he was the least liked child when his own mother could not even remember what kind of sandwiches he liked and did not like. On the train, he also met Hermione Granger, Neville Longbottom, and Draco Malfoy, and he did not care for Hermione or Draco. Hermione embarrassed him while he was trying to perform a spell with his rat Scabbers.
Are you sure that's a real spell? Well, it's not very good, is it?
And Draco called him poor and told Harry not to be friends with him, though Ron was very happy when Harry told him off for this.
You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort.
I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks.
When they arrived at Hogwarts, Ron was sorted in Gryffindor like every other Weasley before him, and was very excited that his new friend Harry was as well. Ron wasn't the best student, showing up late to his first class, zoning out during lessons, and half-assing homework assignments. As the school year commenced, it quickly became clear that Ron was destined to be in yet another person's shadow, this time of Harry Potter, the boy who lived. This upset Ron, as he thought that coming to Hogwarts would finally put him in the spotlight. That being said, he was still very happy to have Harry as a friend, and rooted him on, especially when Harry was invited to play on the Gryffindor Quidditch team by Professor McGonagall herself. Draco was furious about this, and challenged Harry to a duel at midnight, and Ron hyped Harry up for the fight. To the annoyance of Ron, Hermione tried to stop them in the common room, but ultimately, she just went with them. Draco had set them up, however, and while running from Filch the caretaker, Peeves the poltergeist threatened to expose their location, which made an angry Ron swing at Peeves, which was the wrong move, because Peeves immediately started to scream their whereabouts. They just barely escaped Filch, and later, the big 3-headed dog Fluffy. After Hermione corrected Ron in class,
It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
Ron made fun of her behind her back, but when Hermione overheard it, it made her cry all day. That night, however, a troll came into the school, and Ron along with Harry saved Hermione. After Hermione took the blame for them, from that moment on, Hermione Granger became his and Harry's friend. This was great for Ron, because Hermione helped them with their homework, which Ron desperately needed. At the first Gryffindor match, Ron tackled Draco in the stands after he made fun of him and Neville, and Draco ended up leaving with a black eye. One night when Harry found the Mirror of Erised, he had Ron look into it to see his family, not knowing that it only showed each person's most desperate desire. Ron did not see Harry's family, and instead saw himself wearing a head boy badge just like his brother Bill, holding the House Cup and the Quidditch Cup like his brother Charlie, and he asked Harry if he thought it would tell the future, but he was let down when he realized that it couldn't, as Harry's family was dead. This once again shows how desperate Ron was to live up to his brothers, which he never seemed to be able to do in his own eyes. When Hagrid illegally had a dragon named Norbert, things got out of hand, and it ended up biting Ron. The next morning, Ron's hand was swollen to twice its usual size, and he wasn't sure if he should go to the hospital wing, not wanting to get Hagrid into trouble. By the afternoon though, he had no choice but to go after it turned a nasty shade of green. When he went, he told Madame Pomfrey it was a dog bite, which she of course did not believe, but she didn't push the subject. Luckily, Ron arranged for his brother Charlie, who worked with dragons, to pick Norbert up. Ron slipped up, however, when he let Malfoy borrow his book, which had the letter to Charlie in it about Norbert. This ended up getting Harry and Hermione caught after they gave Norbert to Charlie. Ron wasn't there, however, because he was still in the hospital wing. In the films, Ron got caught too and went into the woods for detention, but in the books, it was Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Malfoy that went to detention, while Ron was back at the castle. At the end of the year, Ron, Hermione, and Harry all went to stop Snape, who they thought was trying to get the Philosopher's Stone for Voldemort, but ultimately it was Quirrell. And Ron finally had his moment to shine in the spotlight. He beat the giant chessboard to move on to the next obstacle. To do this, however, he had to sacrifice himself and took a nasty blow from the other side's chess piece. At the end of term feast, Ron's bravery was noticed by Dumbledore, who told the entire school of his bravery, which also helped Gryffindor win the House Cup. That summer, Ron sent Harry many letters, but did not get a response for the entire summer. Ron got worried, and he, Fred, and George took their father's flying car to rescue Harry from the Dursleys, something that got them in a lot of trouble with their mother.
Where have you been?
Ron showed Harry around his house and showed him his room covered in Chudley Cannon posters, and later introduced him to his father. When Ron and Harry tried to go through platform 9 3/4, they were blocked and missed the train. Ron got the idea to fly his father's car to school, thinking it would be okay because it could turn invisible, but when the invisibility booster broke, they were seen by muggles. What started out as a fun adventure that Ron thought would give them glory turned out to be a boring and awful journey that broke Ron's wand.
My wand. Look at my wand.
Got them detention, and got Mr. Weasley in huge trouble with the Ministry. Ron later got a howler from his mother, which the entire school saw and made everyone laugh at him. One day, Ron stood up to Malfoy when he called Hermione a mudblood, but because his wand was broken, the spell shot backwards and hit him, and made him throw up slugs endlessly. For Ron's detention, he was forced to polish the school's trophies by hand. Still throwing up slugs, he puked on one trophy multiple times, making him polish it much more than the others. He noticed the name on the trophy was Tom Riddle. Ron, along with Harry and Hermione, were forced to go to Nearly Headless Nick's Death Day party, and they were the only living people there and had no fun at all. Ron was especially irritated that they missed the amazing Halloween feast in the Great Hall. Learning that the Chamber of Secrets was opened, Ron was sure that Draco Malfoy was the one behind the attacks, and he along with Harry and Hermione made Polyjuice Potion to find out if it was him. Ron became Crabbe, while Harry became Goyle, and they questioned Malfoy, only to find out that he was not the one responsible. Later, Ron and Harry found a diary that belonged to Tom Riddle, and Ron remembered that name from the trophy he cleaned so many times. Ron was very shaken up when Hermione was petrified, and he and Harry buckled down and got to the bottom of the attacks by first going into the Forbidden Forest to talk to Aragog, something that was torture for Ron, whose biggest fear was spiders. And later, with the help of Hermione, from a page that she had ripped out of a book, they found out that the beast in the chamber was a basilisk, and that it was traveling through the pipes. Ron was once again very shaken up when Ginny was taken down to the chamber, and a note was left, saying that her skeleton would lie in the chamber forever. He, along with his brothers and Harry, sat by the fireplace in the common room, too sad to even talk. Ron snapped out of it, however, and he along with Harry went to save Ginny. Ron, Harry, and Lockhart went down to the chamber. Lockhart tried to erase their memories, but because he was using Ron's wand, it fired back on him, and he made himself lose his own memory. When Harry and Ron got separated, Harry went on to save Ginny, and while Ron was waiting, he moved the rocks that separated them. When Harry returned with Ginny, Ron was happier than he had been in a long time, so happy that his sister was okay. That summer, the Weasleys won the Daily Prophet Grand Prize Galleon Draw, and used the money to go to Egypt to visit Ron's oldest brother, Bill. Ron also got Harry in trouble with the Dursleys when he called their home phone, and thinking you had to be loud for them to hear you, he screamed into the phone to the fury of Mr. Dursley. Ron spent the last bit of his summer staying at the Leaky Cauldron with his family, Harry and Hermione. When they first arrived, Ron and Hermione went looking for Harry at Diagon Alley, and when they all got together, Ron went to get medicine for his rat Scabbers. When the woman asked him what power Scabbers had, Ron was very confused, and the woman told him that a normal rat shouldn't live past 3 years. She then offered him another rat, which Ron offensively declined. Just then, an orange cat jumped from the highest cage and landed on Ron's head, trying to go after Scabbers. Scabbers ran for it, and when Ron finally caught him, he was disgusted to find out that Hermione had bought that cat named Crookshanks. When they got to school, tension grew between Ron and Hermione as their new cat continued to go after Scabbers. Things got even worse when Hermione reported Harry's anonymous firebolt broomstick gift to Professor McGonagall, and she confiscated it. They ignored her for days, but when McGonagall returned the broom to him, they were going to make up with her, but it all went wrong when Ron discovered that Scabbers was missing, and he thought that Crookshanks had eaten him. Ron eventually made peace with it though, and he and Hermione were friends again. One night when Ron was sleeping, escaped convict Sirius Black snuck into Gryffindor Tower, and when Ron woke up, Sirius was standing over him with a knife. When Ron screamed, it alerted the whole of Gryffindor.
I was a bit busy dodging his knife.
Word of this spread across the school very fast, and Ron was loving it. He told the story to anyone that would listen, exaggerating it more and more every time he told it. Around that time, Buckbeak the Hippogriff had a trial coming up to determine his fate after he hurt Malfoy in class. Ron spent hours researching in the library, looking for things to help defend him in the trial, but despite all of his work, Buckbeak was still to be executed. When they went to console Hagrid, they found Scabbers, and when they left to avoid being seen out after dark, Scabbers bit Ron and ran to the Whomping Willow. There Ron was bitten and dragged by the leg by a black dog. The trio found out the truth about the Marauders, and Ron was shocked to find out that his pet rat was really Peter Pettigrew, the wizard responsible for giving Voldemort information to kill Harry's parents. While Ron was in the hospital with a hurt leg, Harry and Hermione went back in time to save Sirius and Buckbeak. While on the train ride home, Sirius gave Ron a new owl, knowing that Ron no longer had a pet after losing Scabbers. Ginny named the owl Pigwidgeon because she thought it was cute, but Ron did not like it, and he tried to change it, but after realizing that it would not answer to any other name, he had to keep the name that he disliked for his owl. That summer, Ron, Fred, George, and Mr. Weasley went to pick Harry up from the Dursleys, which led to them blasting the Dursleys' chimney into their living room to the fury of the Dursleys. Ron, Harry, Hermione, and all of Ron's siblings, including Bill and Charlie, who were visiting home, went to the Quidditch World Cup. Ron had saved his money all summer for this event, wanting to buy souvenirs. He bought a dancing shamrock hat and a small figure of Victor Crumb, the Bulgarian seeker. But when he saw Omnioculars were up for sale, he said that he wished he hadn't bought the things that he did. Harry, however, bought him Omnioculars, which made Ron go red, saying not to bother, once again ashamed of being poor. Harry convinced him to take it though, when he said it was Ron's early Christmas present. Before the match, leprechauns threw out leprechaun gold, which Ron gave to Harry in return for the Omnioculars, saying that now he could buy him a Christmas present. During the school year, Ron was starstruck when Victor Crumb came to Hogwarts to compete in the Triwizard Tournament. Thinking about participating in and winning the tournament was something that Ron longed for very much, for both the gold, which his family had never had, and for the glory, something that he never had due to always being in the shadow of his siblings and Harry. Ron feeling this way led to him getting angry when Harry was unexpectedly chosen to be in the tournament.
You're being stupid. Yeah, that's me. Ron Weasley, Harry Potter's stupid friend.
Ron avoided Harry and started spending more time with Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan. Ron and Harry also put Hermione in the middle of their fight, and she explained Ron's actions to Harry. He's jealous. It's always you who gets all the attention. You know Ron's got all those brothers to compete against at home, and you're his best friend, and you're really famous. He's always shunted to one side whenever people see you, and he puts up with it and never mentions it. But I suppose this is just one time too many. The only time Ron and Harry acted like friends was when they both defended Hermione after Malfoy made her front teeth huge and Snape said that he did not see a difference. The two boys rounded on Snape, leading to both of them getting detention. Both boys hoped that they would make up during that 2-hour detention, but earlier that day, Ron had read Rita Skeeter's article that put Harry in the spotlight even more than normal, and it confirmed Ron's suspicions that Harry was enjoying all of the attention he was getting, though in reality, the entire article was rubbish that Harry had nothing to do with. Instead of making up in detention, Ron opted to spend the entire 2 hours in silence. While watching the first task of the tournament, however, Ron realized that he had been wrong. After Harry gave an amazing performance, Ron went with Hermione to see Harry, and his face was as white as a ghost's. Ron said to Harry very seriously that whoever put his name in the goblet was trying to kill him, and before Ron could get his apology out, Harry forgave him and told him to forget it. The two were best friends again. When they were told about the Yule Ball, Ron and Harry became very nervous about getting dates. Ron asked Hermione as a last resort, which deeply offended her, and she told him that she had already been asked by someone, something that Ron did not believe, mostly because he did not want to believe it. When the Yule Ball was fast approaching, Ron, who was unaware of Fleur Delacour's Vila heritage, something that makes her irresistible to men, saw her in the hallway and spontaneously and unwisely asked her to the ball. Before she could even answer, Ron made even more of a fool of himself by turning around and running in the opposite direction. Ron was embarrassed about this for several days, and word of this incident spread like wildfire, especially in the Gryffindor common room. Harry eventually got both himself and Ron a date, asking the Patel twins. Ron's night was ruined, however, when he discovered that Hermione was Victor Crumb's date.
Is that Hermione Granger with Victor Crumb?
No, absolutely not.
He became extremely jealous and told her off for fraternizing with the enemy. This led to a big fight, and was the first inkling that the two had feelings for each other.
Next time there's a ball, pluck up the courage and ask me before somebody else does.
That same night, Ron and Harry overheard a conversation between Hagrid and Maxime, and they discovered that Hagrid was a half-giant, something that shocked Ron, and he had to explain why this was such a big deal to Harry, explaining that giants were hated among wizards. While there should have been major repercussions to Ron and Hermione's disastrous fight, the two woke up the next morning and pretended like nothing had happened. Ron, along with Hermione, helped Harry endlessly with the second task, trying to figure out how he could breathe underwater. But before they could finish helping him, they were taken for the task, and Ron was the thing that Harry had to retrieve underwater. During one Care of Magical Creatures lesson, Ron was horrified to learn that leprechaun gold disappeared after a few hours. Ron pointed out that he had paid Harry back in leprechaun gold for the omnioculars, and asked Harry why he didn't tell him. And when Harry said he just never noticed that it was gone, Ron said jealously that he wished he had enough money to not notice if a pile of gold went missing. For the third task, Ron and Hermione helped Harry by using vacant classrooms to practice spells and jinxes. During the third task, Ron was horrified when Harry returned clutching Cedric's dead body and claiming that Voldemort had returned. Ron was there to support his best friend through this tough time, but when summer hit, he along with Hermione were told by Dumbledore not to give Harry any information on what was going on, leaving Harry in the dark about the Order of the Phoenix and the fact that both of them were living in the Order's headquarters in number 12 Grimmauld Place. Harry eventually joined them toward the end of the summer, and the trio was back together, but Harry was not happy with the two of them.
We've gone all summer without a scrap of news.
We wanted to write, mate. Really, we did.
Only what?
Only Dumbledore made us swear not to tell you anything.
Before school started, Ron got an owl that said he was a prefect. Everyone was in disbelief, thinking that Harry would be chosen. Hermione, George, Fred, and even Ron were all shocked, but he loved the attention this got him, especially from his parents, who normally did not have time for him. They were so proud of him that to reward him, they bought him the new Clean Sweep 11 broomstick, which wasn't the best, but it was the best the Weasleys could afford. Either way, Ron was ecstatic. When school started, Ron was among many that hated their new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Dolores Umbridge, and he helped Hermione convince Harry to teach students real Defense Against the Dark Arts in the club that they formed called Dumbledore's Army. Now having his own broomstick, Ron decided he wanted to try out for the Gryffindor Quidditch team as keeper. He made the team, though Harry wasn't there to support him during the tryout as he was in detention. During Ron's first practice with the team, Malfoy and some other Slytherins went to watch, and they roared with laughter as they watched Ron play keeper. This lowered Ron's self-confidence a great deal and made him get in his own head. Ron continued to get made fun of by Draco, leading to the match against Slytherin, which psyched him out even more, though Hermione successfully distracted him by kissing him on the cheek and wishing him good luck, effectively stunning Ron. When the match started, Ron was humiliated as the Slytherins started singing a song about him. Weasley cannot save a thing. He cannot block a single ring. That's why Slytherins all sing. Weasley is our king. Weasley was born in a bin. He always lets the quaffle in. Weasley will make sure we win. Weasley is our king. This psyched Ron out so much that he let in 4 goals, but luckily, Harry caught the snitch to win the game, making everyone forget about Ron's awful performance. Everyone, that is, except for Ron himself. After the match, Ron wanted to resign from the team, but when he found out that Harry, Fred, and George were all banned from playing Quidditch due to them beating the crap out of Malfoy, he realized that he had no choice but to stay on the team. Between Dumbledore's army meetings, Quidditch practices, homework, and his prefect duties, Ron was incredibly busy, and he did not have time for much else past those 4 things. One night, however, he saw Hermione writing a very long letter, and when he found out it was to Victor Crumb, he got jealous and was quiet for the rest of the night. Right before Christmas break, Ron's father was attacked by Voldemort's snake Nagini, and he and his family, along with Harry and Hermione, went to visit him at St. Mungo's Hospital. There, Ron and the others saw two people they did not expect to see, Neville Longbottom and Gilderoy Lockhart. Lockhart, they found out, still had no memory after using Ron's broken wand 3 years before this, and they met Neville's grandmother and his parents, who had been tortured into madness by Death Eaters, something that made Ron feel awful for Neville, not knowing anything about this until that day. Shortly after returning to school, it was time for the next Gryffindor Quidditch match. The game only lasted 22 minutes, but in those 22 minutes, Ron let in 14 goals. But because Ginny caught the snitch, they only lost by 10 points, which was enough to land Gryffindor in the Quidditch final for the Quidditch Cup. After the match, Ron did not want to talk to anyone. He was hunched in a corner staring at his knees, very disappointed and embarrassed in himself. Angelina Johnson, the Gryffindor Quidditch captain, continued to deny his resignation to the team and said that she knew he had it in him. Ron, however, was miserable, walking back from every practice, hearing the Slytherins sing the "Weasley is our king" song. No Gryffindors expected to win, and though nobody said it out loud, they thought this because of Ron's abysmal goalkeeping record. Ron, however, had a new optimism, saying that he could not do any worse than before. During the match, Ron played incredibly and saved a huge number of goals, leading the Gryffindors to victory. The team carried him on their shoulders as he held up the Quidditch Cup, and the best part was that the Gryffindors had turned the Slytherins' "Weasley is our king" mocking song into a triumphant Gryffindor song. As they carried him, they chanted, "Weasley is our king. He didn't let the quaffle in. Weasley can't save anything. He never leaves a single ring. That's why Gryffindors all sing, Weasley is our king." The next day, Ron was ecstatic and was loving the attention he was getting. Gryffindors constantly patted him on the back, and they would occasionally start chanting the triumphant "Weasley is our king" song. But the thing that gave him the most joy was finally not being in the shadow of his brothers. He was a prefect, and now a Quidditch star. It was the happiest he had been in a long time, but later he was very bummed to find out that Harry and Hermione had missed the match while talking to Hagrid and meeting his half-brother Grawp. He got over it quickly though, eager to hear about where Hagrid had been, as he missed the first half of the school year. Ron took his OWL exams, the test that 5th years had to take, and he did well for the most part, but at one point, he told the examiner in detail about the ugly man with a wart on his nose that he saw in the crystal ball, only to look up and realize he had been describing the examiner's reflection. At the end of the year, Ron joined Harry, Hermione, Neville, Luna, and Ginny to go to the Department of Mysteries after Harry saw a vision of Voldemort about to kill Sirius. When they got there, however, it was a trap, and they were all pursued by Death Eaters. During this, Ron was hit with a spell that made him very loopy, pale, and have dark liquid and blood coming from the corner of his mouth. While he was loopy, he entered the brain room, and he magically called one of the brains to him. When he caught it, its tentacles wrapped itself around him and took him to the ground, squeezing the life out of him. It took him a while, but he eventually overpowered the brain, but he was still too loopy to help in the fight when members of the Order arrived and a huge battle commenced. During the battle, Sirius was killed, and Ron was devastated. He along with Hermione were there for Harry losing his godfather, and they kept him distracted when they returned to school so he would not think too much about it. The following summer, Ron found out that his older brother Bill was engaged to Fleur Delacour, the very girl that Ron had humiliated himself in front of when asking her to the Yule Ball. While Mrs. Weasley, Ginny, and Hermione all disliked her presence at the Burrow that summer, Ron loved her being there and defended her to his family and Hermione. His liking of Fleur annoyed Hermione, who was finding it harder and harder to keep her feelings for Ron under wraps. As the summer was winding down, the Weasleys had Hermione and Harry stay at the Burrow for the remainder of the summer, and when Harry arrived, he told Ron and Hermione that he was taking private lessons with Dumbledore, who had instructed Harry to share everything with Ron and Hermione but no one else, clearly putting great trust in Harry's friends. When it was time to go back to Hogwarts, Ron did not get an invite to Horace Slughorn's Slug Club, which had the brightest and most promising students that Hogwarts had to offer at that time, and he was very jealous and annoyed when Harry, Hermione, and Ginny were all invited. In Ron's 6th year, it became clear that he and Hermione had strong feelings for each other, and the two hinted at it many times. Even though Ron was the Quidditch star that led Gryffindor to victory last season, he still had to try out for this season under Gryffindor's new captain, Harry himself. He beat Cormac McLaggen out for goalkeeper, though unknown to Ron, Hermione helped him by using magic to make Cormac let a goal in. After the Quidditch practice, Ron caught Ginny and Dean kissing, which infuriated Ron, and he yelled at his little sister. Ginny responded to this by calling Ron out, saying that he was just mad because he had never kissed anyone when everyone else had, Harry with Cho, and to Ron's horror, Hermione with Victor. And she finished, saying that he had about as much experience with it as a 12-year-old. This made Ron furious, and he and Ginny stayed mad at each other for quite a while. Learning that Hermione had kissed Victor ate Ron up from the inside, and he started treating her with a cold indifference, which really confused and upset her, especially because she wanted to ask him to Slughorn's Christmas party.
Slughorn's having Christmas do, you know. And we're meant to bring someone.
I expect you'll be bringing McLagan. He's in the Slug Club, isn't he?
Actually, I was going to ask you.
Really?
Learning about Hermione and Victor also made Ron perform poorly in Quidditch, and this worried Harry, as their first match against Slytherin was coming up. Harry pretended to put liquid luck in Ron's drink to give him more confidence, and it worked. He played amazingly, saving shot after shot. Between jealousy, finding out about Hermione and Victor, the fact that his little sister was calling him out for not kissing anyone, and finding out that Lavender Brown liked him, he kissed her after the match despite everyone. Unfortunately for him, what started out as something to make Hermione jealous turned into an awful relationship and made Hermione furious with him, sending birds after him. Lavender was obsessed with Ron and never left him alone.
All she wants to do is snog me. My lips are getting chapped, look.
And I'll take your word for it.
For Christmas, Lavender got Ron a necklace that said, "My sweetheart," dangling from a chain. Meanwhile, Ron and Hermione were still fighting, and in one class, Ron accidentally gave himself a handlebar mustache, which Hermione laughed at hysterically. But she stopped immediately when Ron did a cruel impression of her, jumping up and down in her seat every time a professor asked a question, which made Lavender and Parvati laugh at her. Hermione successfully got Ron jealous again when she asked Cormac McLagan to Slughorn's Christmas party, knowing that Ron hated him.
Cormac, that's who you invited.
I thought it would annoy Ron the most.
Ron began to get more and more annoyed with Lavender, and he tried to make up with Hermione, but Hermione ignored him, still upset with how he treated her before. On Ron's 17th birthday, he accidentally ate chocolates that had a love potion in them that were meant for Harry. Harry took him to Slughorn's for an antidote, and after curing him, Slughorn gave Ron poisoned mead by accident, which nearly killed him, but Harry saved him using a bezoar. This made Hermione change her attitude toward Ron, and she was at his bedside constantly while he was recovering in the hospital wing. When he was still out of it and heard Hermione's voice, he said Hermione's name in his sleep. When he got a little better, he looked forward to Hermione's visits more than anything, but he dreaded Lavender's visits, and when she came, he would pretend to be asleep. After Ron was better and released from the hospital, he did everything he could to ignore and get away from Lavender, and now that he and Hermione were friends again, Lavender became suspicious of their relationship. One day, Lavender saw Ron and Hermione come out of the boys' dormitories, not being able to see Harry, who was under the invisibility cloak, and she screamed at Ron, asking what he was doing with her, and her doing this ultimately led to them breaking up. Lavender was a wreck, especially after seeing Hermione hold Ron's arm when he was making it snow, and when Ron looked over and saw a red-eyed and furious Lavender, he felt very guilty. Ron was very happy though, and he thought that his and Hermione's relationship was better than ever. Now that Ron was 17, he was eligible to take his apparition test, meaning he could magically appear or disappear with a wave of his wand. When he took the test, however, he failed for leaving behind half an eyebrow. Ron helped Gryffindor win the Quidditch Cup for the second year in a row, but he was absolutely shocked when afterwards he saw Ginny and Harry kiss when Harry entered the common room. When the two finally pulled apart, Ron had an expression that looked like he had just been clubbed over the head. For a fraction of a second, he and Harry looked at each other. Then Ron gave a tiny jerk of his head that said, "Well, if you must." Ron supported Harry and Ginny dating, his only sister and his best friend, although there were times when he told them to tame it down a bit. At the end of term, the Battle of the Astronomy Tower took place, and Harry made Ron, Hermione, and Ginny take the remainder of his liquid luck to ensure their safety. During the battle, Dumbledore lost his life, and Ron's brother Bill was attacked by a werewolf named Greyback. Ron was shaken to see his oldest brother so wounded. He was happy to hear, however, that his brother would make a recovery, though he would always have scars on his face. Ron and much of his family attended Dumbledore's funeral, and there, Ron comforted Hermione as she cried on his shoulder. After the funeral ended, and they were standing next to Dumbledore's tomb, Ron was shocked when Harry said he wasn't coming back for their 7th year of Hogwarts. Harry told Ron and Hermione his plan to find and destroy each of Voldemort's Horcruxes, and after a few seconds of silence, Ron said that he and Hermione would be by his side. That summer, Ron participated in the Battle of 7 Potters. He and 6 others used Polyjuice Potion to turn into Harry, and each of them were paired with another Order member who was going to one of the 7 safe houses. Ron was paired with Tonks, and they were going to Ron's Aunt Muriel's house. Unknown to them, however, there was an entire army of Death Eaters waiting for them in the sky. Ron saved both himself and Tonks by stunning one of the Death Eaters right in the face. They made it to Aunt Muriel's house, but they were late and missed their portkey to the burrow, so they were forced to go back in the sky and fly there on their broom. Ron was immediately greeted by a worried Hermione, who wrapped her arms around him. They all stayed at the Burrow, and while there, Ron burst into a room to find Harry and Ginny kissing, and was immediately yelled at by Hermione for ruining their moment. The trio got a visit from the Minister for Magic himself, Rufus Scrimgeour, who presented them with Dumbledore's will. Dumbledore left Ron his Deluminator.
I leave my Deluminator, a device of my own making, in the hope that when things seem most dark, it will show him the light.
Ron was shocked to get this, as he wasn't very close with Dumbledore, and knew that there must be a deeper meaning for giving it to him. While the trio stayed at the Burrow for Bill and Fleur's wedding, the three of them planned for their dangerous mission. Mrs. Weasley was very opposed to this, however, and split the three of them up so they would not be able to plan. The part of the plan that Ron came up with was brilliant. Because he wouldn't be in school, he did not want to put his family at risk, so he convinced Fred and George to help him transfigure the ghoul that lived in their attic and make it look more human and dress it in pajamas. He gave it boils so it looked like he had spattergroit, a highly contagious wizarding disease caused by infectious fungus. He also had his dad spread the news without Mrs. Weasley knowing that he was sick, and that way it would be more believable. Before he left, Ron had the ghoul take over his room and his bed, and his hope was that this would convince any ministry officials or Death Eaters that he was seriously ill. At the wedding, Ron became very jealous when Victor Crumb showed up and tried to talk to Hermione. When he saw the two together, Ron quickly asked her if she wanted to dance, doing exactly what Hermione had told him to do 3 years earlier at the Yule Ball.
Next time there's a ball, pluck up the courage and ask me before somebody else does.
He asked her before Crumb could, unlike last time. When the two went to dance, Crumb asked Harry if they were together, and Harry replied saying sort of in a tentative voice. When Death Eaters crashed the wedding, Ron, Hermione, and Harry escaped, but later they ran into more Death Eaters who they beat in a duel. Ron had Hermione modify the Death Eaters' memories so they wouldn't know that Ron was with them, ensuring that Ron's ghoul plan stayed in place. His ghoul plan worked perfectly, and when Death Eaters searched the Burrow from top to bottom, they found the ghoul and thought it was Ron, and did not want to get too close, scared that they would get sick too. The trio went to number 12 Grimmauld Place for refuge, and the first night they were there, Ron and Hermione fell asleep holding hands, happy to be with one another. While they were there, they found out that Umbridge had Slytherin's locket, one of the Horcruxes, and they formed a plan to break into the ministry and take it from her. They used Polyjuice Potion to disguise themselves as ministry employees, and while there, Ron ran into his father, but he knew he could not say anything to him or blow his cover, which was very difficult because he missed his family very much. The trio eventually got the locket and tried to escape to number 12 Grimmauld Place, but Yaxley grabbed hold of them, and they were forced to take refuge in the woods. While apparating, however, Ron got splinched, leaving a piece of his arm back at Grimmauld Place, and he was forced to bandage his arm for a while. The trio took turns wearing the Horcrux locket, and it affected their mood, but it affected Ron far more than the other two. Frequently, Ron would listen to the radio, wanting to know if something happened to his family, which annoyed Harry greatly. Tension built between Harry and Ron, and eventually it led to a fight and an angry Ron leaving.
And you? Are you coming or are you staying? Fine. I get it.
As soon as he left and was away from the Horcrux, he came to his senses and tried to return, but unfortunately, he was stopped by Snatchers who interrogated him. Ron told them that his name was Stan Shunpike. When they looked it up, he took the opportunity to escape and tried to return to his friends, but after trying to apparate numerous times looking for Harry and Hermione, even splinching his fingernail off at one point, he could not find them. He eventually gave up and was too ashamed to go back home to the Burrow, knowing that they would be disappointed in him for abandoning Harry, so instead he went to Bill and Fleur's house in Shell Cottage. Ron eventually realized that the Deluminator that Dumbledore had left him was sort of like a homing device. Whenever Hermione and Harry mentioned his name, Ron would hear snippets of their conversation even though they were miles away, and it later did even more than that, and acted as a guide, leading him right back to Harry and Hermione.
With this, it doesn't just turn off lights. This tiny ball of light appeared. It floated toward me, the ball of light, went right to my chest, straight through me. Right here. I knew it was going to take me where I needed to go. So I disapparated.
When he returned, he saw Harry at the bottom of a lake, and he jumped in to save him, and also retrieved the Sword of Gryffindor and the Horcrux. Ron then destroyed the Horcrux that affected him so deeply, but not before it showed him his greatest fears of being unwanted by his family and Hermione.
Least loved by your mother who craved a daughter, least loved by the girl who prefers your friend.
Afterwards, Harry told Ron that Hermione cried for a week after he left, which made Ron feel awful. Harry then assured him that he loved Hermione like a sister, and that she felt the same way about him, and that it's always been like that. He finished by saying that he thought he knew that, which made Ron feel foolish, but gave him some relief nonetheless. When he returned to Hermione, she was mad at him for a few days, but eventually she got over it, especially when they were almost caught by Death Eaters while visiting Xenophilius Lovegood. After they escaped, they continued to camp out, and one night, Harry started to say Voldemort's name, but Ron screamed not to, as he had found out that saying his name would lead Snatchers right to them. The Snatchers and Death Eaters figuring that only those that were against him would say it, but Ron could not stop him in time. It was too late. Harry had said his name. Snatchers showed up right away and took them, and when they grabbed Hermione, Ron yelled,
Don't touch her!
only to get hit very hard. They were taken to Malfoy Manor, and there, Ron and Harry were locked up, while Hermione was tortured upstairs by Bellatrix. While they were locked up, Ron and Harry desperately tried to stop Peter Pettigrew from strangling himself, the man that Ron had believed to be his rat for years, but it was no use. They watched as his own hand squeezed the life out of him. The two then went upstairs to save Hermione, but when Bellatrix put a knife to Hermione's throat, they surrendered. The trio was then saved by Dobby, who took them to Bill and Fleur's house in Shell Cottage, but this made him lose his life to the horror of Ron and the others. As they buried him, Ron was very sad to lose someone who was so innocent. Now that Bellatrix, Lucius, Narcissa, and Draco had seen Ron with Harry, they figured out the ghoul that the Weasleys claimed to be Ron wasn't really him, and the Weasleys had to stop going to work, and Ginny was pulled out of school, and they all stayed under the radar. While at Shell Cottage, the trio made a plan to break into Gringotts, where they thought another Horcrux was. They worked with Griphook, and they magically changed Ron's appearance to make him unrecognizable.
What do you think? I wouldn't know you if I didn't know you.
They got in the vault and got the Horcrux, but they were betrayed by Griphook, who took the Sword of Gryffindor, the only thing they had that could destroy Horcruxes, as it had basilisk venom in it. They made a daring escape from the bank, riding on the back of a dragon that was supposed to be guarding the vault. When Harry realized the last Horcrux was at Hogwarts, the trio went back to the school, and the Battle of Hogwarts commenced. Hermione and Ron went down to the Chamber of Secrets, when Ron had the brilliant idea to take a basilisk fang to destroy the Horcruxes. When the trio met back up in the Room of Requirement, Ron frantically said that they had forgotten the house elves who were down in the kitchens, and he said that they had to warn them and save them. This made Hermione, who was obsessed with house elf rights, run to Ron, and the two had their first kiss. Ron kissed her so passionately that he lifted her off her feet. Later, the trio faced Malfoy and his cronies, who ended up sending Fiendfire ablaze the room. Ron, Harry, and Hermione flew out, but Harry said that they had to go back to save them.
If we die for them, Harry, I'm gonna kill you!
As the battle commenced, Ron was with Fred, George, Percy, Harry, and Hermione, and as they were fighting, the wall next to them exploded. Ron heard Percy shout Fred's name desperately, and he knew something was wrong. He ran over to his brothers, and he knelt beside Fred. Fred's eyes stared without seeing. Ron was kneeling next to his lifeless brother. Ron was devastated, but he did not have time to mourn. They had to move right away. Ron watched Percy run after the Death Eater Rookwood, and he wanted to join him. His face was contorted, smeared with dust, smoke, and tears. He was shaking with rage and grief. I want to help. I want to kill Death Eaters. He was in too much grief to think of anything else, and it took everything that Harry and Hermione had to remind him of their mission. A crying Hermione was begging him to focus, and said that they were the only ones who could end this war. When Harry found out where Voldemort was, it snapped Ron back, and he was determined. The three went to find Voldemort in the Shrieking Shack, and there, they witnessed Severus Snape's death. During a break in the battle, Ron mourned Fred's death with the rest of his family, all heartbroken. Hermione comforted him, but the break ended when Voldemort and his Death Eaters returned with Harry's dead body. Unlike in the films, in the books, Harry did not say goodbye to them. He went into the forest to meet Voldemort without saying a word to anyone except for Neville. So when Voldemort returned with Harry, Ron was shocked and devastated. First his brother, and now his best friend. When Voldemort said to the defenders of Hogwarts that Harry was nothing but a boy who relied on others to sacrifice themselves for him, Ron screamed back at Voldemort, saying that Harry had beaten him, which made Voldemort raise his wand and silence them. Again, unlike in the films, in the books, the battle commenced when Neville ran forward and killed Voldemort's snake Nagini, the final Horcrux. Everyone still thinking that Harry was dead fought back against Voldemort and his army. Ron and Neville fought Greyback, the werewolf that attacked Ron's older brother Bill a year earlier, and together, he and Neville brought him down. To Ron's shock, Harry revealed himself from under the invisibility cloak, alive and well, and Ron was relieved that his best friend was alright. He watched Harry defeat Voldemort once and for all, and after it was all over, Ron and Hermione were the first to reach him and hugged him, soon followed by everyone else in the room. In the wake of the battle, Ron never finished his 7th year of Hogwarts, and instead became an Auror at the Ministry of Magic. He and Harry's work in the Ministry revolutionized the Auror department, and along with Hermione, the trio helped make a new world for the wizarding community. All three of them were featured on chocolate frog cards for their heroic part in ending the Second Wizarding War, which Ron considered to be his finest hour. After 2 years of being an Auror, however, Ron left to help his brother George run Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, the joke shop that the twins had opened up a few years back. This decision was questioned by a few, especially Rita Skeeter, who wrote an article about him, saying that he left because Ron was tired of being in Harry's shadow, though this was not the case. He just wanted to honor his late brother's memory and make sure that George wasn't under too much pressure running the shop without Fred. Ron went on to marry Hermione, and together they had 2 children, a girl named Rose and a boy named Hugo. He was also made the godfather of Harry and Ginny's oldest son, James Sirius Potter. Ron spent much of his early life in other people's shadows, whether it was his siblings, Harry, or even Hermione. But he proved to be his own man, stepping up numerous times in heroic ways, many of which led to the ultimate defeat of arguably the most powerful dark wizard of all time. Ron always cared for those closest to him and was there for anyone who needed him. Ron will always be remembered as a genuine and kind friend, and a boy with the biggest heart.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life and see more of this little dude. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook for Movie Flame updates. And I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed below. If you want to be featured in the next video, plus get a bunch of other rewards, become a patron today. Again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you press that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great videos on the way.